Why did the entire dining hall go silent the moment she turned her chair? It wasn't loud before. Just the quiet rhythm of trays, the hum of air vents, the clatter of cutlery and half-awake soldiers murmuring over gray morning coffee. But when Laura West shifted in her seat, just slightly, just enough for the edge of her shirt to rise, the air changed. A breathless stillness, the kind that comes before a gunshot. They saw it. A black inked eagle stretched wide across her shoulder blade, talons poised, beak open mid-strike. And beneath it, a line of code most soldiers here had only heard whispered during deployments. VX097310. It meant nothing to civilians, but to the three veterans at the table behind her, it was the ghost of a unit erased from every record. The kind of thing that was supposed to stay buried. One of them froze mid-bite. Another's fork hit the tray with a metallic clink, and then all three rose, almost unconsciously, as if muscle memory demanded it. Laura didn't notice, or pretended not to. She only bent to pick up the folder that had slipped from her lap, her movements calm, composed, practiced. She learned a long time ago that the smallest motion could shift the entire energy of a room. She took a slow sip of coffee, eyes tracing the streaks of morning light cutting across the mess hall windows. Calm outside, quiet inside, but tension has its own frequency, and she could feel it hum through the floor. Across from her, Karen Brooks leaned in, the kind of lean that carried both curiosity and warning. "If what you said earlier is true," Karen murmured, voice low, "then my soldiers might actually stand a chance next deployment." Laura's lips curved, not quite a smile. "If they listen, they will." Her words were steady, but her shoulders tightened, just enough for anyone trained to notice. From the next table, someone whispered her name into a phone. Another tapped out a message. A chain reaction she couldn't stop had already begun. She'd seen it before suspicion, moving faster than any order. A deep, gravel-edged voice broke through the tension. "Sounds like you've been there." The room seemed to tilt toward the sound. Master Sergeant Ray Collins, tall, weathered, uniform sun-faded and perfectly pressed, approached with a gait that spoke of old injuries carried too long. His eyes weren't curious. They were searching, cross-referencing, comparing her face to a file he'd once read. Karen gestured between them. "Ray, this is Laura West, our new training advisor." Ray nodded once, slow. "What will my soldiers learn from you?" Laura's reply came quietly. "How not to die waiting for permission." Ray studied her for a beat. "Where'd you serve?" "Afghanistan, 2007 to 2010, forward operating bases, convoys, medical extractions." He blinked, recognition flickering. "Hard years, we lost good people." Laura didn't answer. She learned long ago that silence, when held steady, spoke louder than any confession. Around them, the conversation at nearby tables resumed, but not naturally. People listened without looking. The ones who weren't listening were typing, phones angled just below the table edge. The rumor would spread faster than the morning orders. By the time she left the dining hall, the words, "VX097310, would already be whispered across Fort Blackhawk like a half-remembered nightmare. Outside, sunlight broke through low clouds, painting the training compound in streaks of gold. The flag rippled above the yard. Soldiers moved in formation below, their cadence crisp, unbothered. Laura glanced at her watch, 07:58. Her first training session started in 2 minutes. She dumped her tray, adjusted her plain black polo, and walked toward the Combat Medic Training Center, a low, steel-walled building built to resemble nothing but a bunker. A few soldiers saluted, others didn't. Civilians rarely earned respect here without proving themselves first. She understood. This place didn't trust words, only results. As she reached for the door, her reflection caught in the glass. A calm face, hair pulled back tight, eyes that revealed nothing. The kind of face people forget until they remember too much. She exhaled, pressed the access pad, and stepped inside. The door sealed shut behind her. For a second, total silence. Then the lights cut out. Rotor blades thundered from hidden speakers. The floor trembled. A sudden rush of air filled the room, cold and heavy. 12 soldiers sat frozen in a half-circle. Combat medics, the elite class, selected for the hardest field extractions. Their expressions shifted between annoyance and alertness. Civilians didn't usually run their drills, let alone start them without warning. Laura walked calmly to the center table, setting down a worn leather bag. It looked out of place in the sterile white room, scuffed, old, but cared for. She didn't raise her voice, yet every word carried. Sit easy. No one moved. For the next 2 weeks, she said, you'll learn what the manuals don't tell you. Out there, gear fails. Orders change. You'll have more wounded than you can treat, and no one will thank you for surviving. A hand rose. Sergeant First Class Juan Herrera, square jaw, sharp eyes, calm but probing. Ma'am, the battlefield for a medic isn't the same as for a rifleman. What exactly have you seen that qualifies you to teach us? Laura's eyes didn't flinch. Afghanistan, 2007 through 2010, convoy extractions, civilian triage under fire, things that never made it into reports. A dry laugh came from the back row. Corporal Luke Gray, younger, confident, the kind who'd rather test you than trust you. Plenty of people served in Afghanistan. What makes yours different? Laura looked at him, not with anger, but with a slow, unreadable calm. I'll show you. She pressed a button on the control panel. The lights shifted to red. Alarms wailed. Helicopter rotors pounded overhead. From hidden compartments, casualty mannequins rolled out chest wounds, amputations, arterial bleeds. The air turned metallic with the smell of training fluid and ozone. Warm-up drill, she said. 15 minutes. No prep, no warning, treat what's in front of you. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Herrera snapped into command, assigning tasks. Guerrero, Gray, chest and abdominal. Cox, amputations. Everyone else, prep evac zone. The countdown clock blinked red. 15:00. At 13:02, Guerrero's suction device sputtered and died. She froze. Guerrero, Laura called. When the gear's dead, what do you do? I. Then think. Guerrero grabbed a water bottle, sprayed the wound, clearing the airway manually. Crude, desperate, effective. Laura nodded once. Good. The battlefield doesn't care about regulations. It cares about who thinks faster. At 11:09, Gray cursed. Need a proper wrap. Don't have one, Laura replied. Casualty, bleeding out, 10 minutes left. Gray gritted his teeth, fumbling. Laura dropped beside him, ripped a t-shirt from the medkit, twisted it into a tourniquet, clamped it above the wound, tied it tight. The heartbeat monitor steadied. Don't worship the tools, she said quietly. Worship the principles. Something shifted in the room. The doubt began to crack. Herrera and Guerrero improvised with cargo straps, gloves, rifle slings. The air filled with urgency, the kind that felt too real for a simulation. And then, when Laura bent to help Guerrero turn a mannequin, her shirt shifted again. The upper curve of the black eagle tattoo glinted under the red light. Talons curved around the faint code, VX097310. Guerrero saw it just for a moment and froze. Not in confusion, in recognition. She'd seen that code once in a redacted report during her intelligence rotation. A covert unit long erased, the kind that didn't leave survivors. The countdown blared, 5 minutes left. Laura's tone never changed. Pressure, 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 keep them breathing. The medics moved faster, voices overlapping, chaos with rhythm. At 0, the lights returned to white. The room went still again. Laura turned toward them, face unreadable. Tomorrow, it won't just be mannequins. You'll see things you'll wish you hadn't. Then she locked the control panel, slung her leather bag over her shoulder and walked out. The door sealed behind her. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then Gray muttered, "What the hell was that?" Herrera didn't answer. He was still staring at the door, and the shadow of that tattoo burned into his memory. Outside, rain had begun to fall, soft at first, then harder, each drop drumming on the asphalt like distant gunfire. Laura walked across the training yard, head bowed slightly, jacket collar raised. Rumors were already forming. She could feel them. VX097310. War Eagle. Shadow something. Names change, but ghosts don't. Inside, the 12 medics were still processing what had just happened. And somewhere, beyond that base, beyond those walls, someone who was never supposed to hear that code again had just been alerted that it had resurfaced. Laura reached the barracks, paused beneath the overhang, watching the storm gather. Her reflection looked back from the rain-slick window, calm, expressionless, but her hands trembled ever so slightly. You can't bury everything, she thought. Some things dig their way back up. The wind howled through the flagpoles. The thunder rolled like distant artillery. And in the heart of Fort Blackhawk, the woman they thought was just another civilian trainer was about to become the center of a story none of them were ready for. Why was the rain falling harder now, as if the sky itself was warning them? By dawn, Fort Blackhawk was awake. Engines rumbled. Boots struck the pavement in unison. The gray mist clung low over the range, blurring the lines between land and sky. Soldiers moved like shadows through the drizzle, their breath visible in the cold. Laura stood at the edge of the training yard, her jacket soaked through, eyes scanning the field. The day hadn't started, yet she already felt the weight pressing behind her ribs, that quiet tension that told her something unseen had begun to move. The night before, someone had sent an encrypted message from the base network. Only 4 words. VX097310 has surfaced. By the time command intercepted it, the sender was gone. But Laura didn't need to be told. She lived long enough to know that the past never sent warnings, only reminders. The PA crackled overhead. Combat medic candidates report to Field Grid 7, immediate assembly. She was already walking before the announcement ended. Rain whipped across her face, sharp and cold. The training field stretched ahead, transformed overnight into a mock war zone. Collapsed brick walls, burned-out vehicles, colored smoke curling through alleyways. Loudspeakers blared the chaos of war, screaming explosions, the deep thump of distant mortars. 12 medics stood waiting, rain dripping from their helmets. Their expressions were hard now. Yesterday's skepticism had turned to something else, respect, maybe fear. Laura stopped in front of them. "Today," she said, "we work outside." No preamble, no hesitation, just that calm voice steady as rain. Herrera blinked against the water. "Ma'am, scenario details." Laura shook her head. "No details. You'll move 1 mile through the zone, treat the wounded, extract before enemy contact. Time limit 20 minutes. Gray muttered something under his breath. Guerrero elbowed him to shut up. Laura's gaze swept over them once. "Begin." The whistle cut the air, and they were off. Mud splashed under their boots as they advanced through the broken terrain. Smoke burned their lungs. The first casualty appeared behind a collapsed wall, a mannequin, but the blood simulation was too real. Abdomen ruptured, pulse weak. Guerrero dropped to her knees, hands moving fast. Then the loudspeaker erupted, a simulated mortar strike. Dirt and rain exploded around them. From the smoke, an actor stumbled forward, clutching his side, shirt soaked in fake blood. Civilian. Gray shouted over the chaos. "Not in the scenario, leave him." Guerrero hesitated. "He's bleeding out." "Stick to the plan." Laura's voice cut through like a blade. "Your choice saves or kills someone. Decide now." Guerrero looked up, drenched and trembling, then dragged the civilian into cover. I treat both. Gray swore but kept moving. Herrera's voice came through the radio, calm under pressure. Contact left, sim rounds incoming. They ducked behind a burned-out armored carrier. The sound system blasted fake gunfire, but the weight of adrenaline was real. 300 meters to the extraction gate. The mud deepened. Their boots sank. Guerrero's gloves slipped against the stretcher handles. Gray caught one side just in time, jaw tight, breath ragged. Then Herrera shouted, "Critical casualty ahead." The mannequin lay sprawled in open ground, simulated arterial bleed. Herrera reached for his medkit, only to find key tools missing. Laura's voice came over the radio. They were removed. Herrera blinked. Removed. Simulating loss of supply. Improvise. Herrera's hands moved on instinct. Rifle sling as tourniquet. A scarf from an actor's pack for compression. Improvised morphine from saline solution. Gray's shoulder caught two bright red sim paint hits. "I'm down," he shouted. "Then fight down," Laura yelled. "You don't stop until you stop breathing." Gray cursed again, dragging the stretcher one-handed through the mud, body shaking. Rain blinded them now, heavy, relentless. And then it happened again. Laura bent to lift the stretcher, her coat pulling tight across her back. The eagle tattoo flashed beneath the stormlight's sharp beak, spread wings, talons clenched around a compass, code burned beneath. VX097310. Herrera froze, his voice caught mid-command. "Ma'am, that." Laura straightened, eyes like ice. "Focus on your casualty, Sergeant." The tone was final, discussion over. The team pushed on. 50 meters to the extraction gate. The loudspeakers screamed with simulated enemy fire. Guerrero slipped, nearly dropping the stretcher. Gray gritted his teeth, grabbed her arm, hauled it back up, taking another paint hit to the back. "Move," Laura shouted, sprinting beside them. "Don't look back." They burst through the gate, just as the countdown clock hit 0. The siren stopped, the rain didn't. Yellow light blinked across the field. ENDEX. Laura exhaled once, slow. Herrera, good improvisation. Guerrero, civilian extraction risky but moral calculus matters. Gray, 2 hits. In real life you'd be dead before your patient. Gray's jaw clenched, he said nothing. Laura's gaze swept over them, calm, deliberate. The battlefield doesn't care about manuals. From now on, neither do you. Then she turned, walking away into the rain. No one followed. Herrera watched her silhouette fade into the gray mist, that tattoo burning in his thoughts like a brand. VX097310. He'd seen it once before. Not in training manuals, not in classified med reports, but in a file-stamped Shadow Talon. Hours later, when most of the base had gone quiet again, the medic unit was summoned back to the urban mock-up. No explanation. Just Laura waiting under the dripping edge of a collapsed roof. "Second scenario," she said flatly. "You'll receive mission details over radio during movement. No pre-brief." Herrera frowned. "Ma'am, are we authorized for?" She cut him off. "The battlefield doesn't ask for authorization." He nodded once, understood. They moved. Rain fell harder, filling the alleys with puddles that reflected broken neon training lights. The radio hissed. "Casualty. Building 7, under fire." "Copy," Herrera said, advancing. Then gunfire cracked through the rain. But this wasn't simulated. There was no paint spray, no compressed air pop. It was real. Gray dove behind cover. "What the hell, those are live rounds." Herrera's pulse spiked. "This isn't part of the drill." Laura froze, eyes scanning rooftops. Then she saw him. A shadow moving above the alley. Old weapon, wood-stocked, mercenary design, Narvek border issue, not Fort Blackhawk gear. Her hand moved automatically, pulling the training carbine from her pack. It was supposed to fire blanks, but the magazine she slid in wasn't standard. A real mag, wrapped in waterproof cloth, kept for years. Rain streaked down her face, hair clinging to her temples. "Cover the casualty," she ordered. Herrera hesitated. "Ma'am, you can't." "Now." One breath, one shot. The rooftop shadow fell. The rifle clattered down the concrete. Then silence. The kind that presses on your chest and makes the world sound distant. Laura lowered her weapon slowly. Her coat shifted. The full tattoo glistened under the rain, hooked beak, spread wings, compass, the code VX097310. Herrera's stomach dropped. He'd seen that mark in a classified mission file 12 years ago. Operation Shadow Talon, a covert op buried under redacted lines, chemical weapons, civilian hostages, a city on the Narvak border. Every soldier involved was declared KIA. All but 4. And all 4 were erased from the records. "Move," Laura ordered, pulling the team toward the extraction zone. No one argued. They didn't need to. Back at the safe house, Gray ripped off his helmet. That wasn't training, that was live fire. Laura checked the team pulse, gear, eyes. No injuries, no losses. "Losses," Gray barked. "We could've." Her eyes lifted to his. Cold, deep, the kind of gaze that made words die mid-sentence. Gray looked away first. Minutes later, base security arrived full lockdown. MPs combed the area. Questions flew, but answers came slow. Someone had infiltrated Fort Blackhawk during a controlled exercise. Someone who shouldn't have known the layout or the schedule. Rumors spread faster than the investigation. Some said the intruder was targeting Laura. Others whispered she'd staged it herself. By nightfall, the compound pulsed with quiet tension. Soldiers glanced over their shoulders. Doors stayed locked. Radios hummed with encrypted chatter. That night, Laura sat alone in the conference room, fingers wrapped around a metal mug that had gone cold an hour ago. Rain tapped steady against the window. Her reflection looked back, tired eyes, unshaken posture. She learned to hide tremors beneath composure. The door opened. Sergeant Major Ramos stepped in, followed by Karen Brooks and Master Sergeant Ray Collins. No folders, no notebooks, just questions. Ramos sat across from her. "I want to hear your account, how you identified the intruder, and how you took the shot." Laura set the mug down gently. "Intruder entered live fire range with non-regulation weapon. I acted to protect trainees. 0 injuries. Mission integrity preserved." Ray's voice was quiet but edged. "That reaction time, that precision. Civilians don't shoot like that." Karen tapped her tablet, projecting a still image onto the wall. The frozen frame from the security feed showed Laura mid-action, Rain, rifle raised, the tattoo visible. Karen's voice lowered. "I checked. No active or decommissioned unit matches that insignia." Laura's gaze didn't shift. Some things aren't registered. Ramos folded his arms. "We found evidence the intruder wasn't alone, maybe testing our base defenses. If so, you might have just made yourself the target." Laura's tone didn't change. Wouldn't be the first time. Silence stretched between them. The hum of the lights filled it. When the meeting ended, Ray stopped her in the hallway. Rain fell outside, streaking down the glass like tears the sky didn't want to shed. "VX097310, he said. "I've heard it. Shadow Talon, Narvak 2011. Official report said everyone died." Laura stepped closer, her voice a whisper. "The report was wrong. One survived." Ray froze. "You?" Her expression didn't change. "Some missions never end, Sergeant. They just go quiet for a while." She adjusted her jacket, hiding the tattoo again. "If you want to live long, forget this conversation." Then she walked away. her boots echoing down the corridor until the sound vanished into the rain. Outside, the night was darker than usual. A black SUV sat parked in the corner lot, engine off, windows fogged. Laura's eyes narrowed. On the windshield lay a small metal tag, engraved with the same eagle as her tattoo, but with a different code, VX09E732. Her breath caught. Her fingers closed around the tag, metal cold against her skin. No one alive should know that number. Except 3 people. And 2 of them had been dead for 12 years. She looked toward the barracks, where lights still glowed in the mist, where new soldiers slept believing their world was secure. She knew better. Security is just a pause between storms. And somewhere out there, the storm that created her was moving again. What happens when ghosts start sending messages again? By the time the sun broke over Fort Blackhawk, Laura hadn't slept. The rain had stopped, leaving the ground slick, the air heavy with that post-storm silence that feels like the world is holding its breath. She sat at her desk, still in uniform pants, boots unlaced, jacket draped across the chair beside her. The metal tag lay in front of her, the eagle emblem catching the faint light from the window. VX09E732. She turned it between her fingers. Whoever left it had been close enough to touch her vehicle, close enough to walk the base perimeter without triggering the alarms. That meant one of 2 things. Either security had failed, or someone inside Fort Blackhawk wanted her to know she was being watched. Neither option sat easy. She leaned back, eyes tracing the slow rotation of the ceiling fan. 12 years since Narvak. 12 years since the code had last been used. 12 years since she'd stood on a street surrounded by smoke, blood, and the smell of burning fuel, watching teammates vanish one by one. She blinked the memory away. Not now, not here. The intercom buzzed. "Training room 5 minutes," Karen's voice said, clipped and professional. Laura closed her hand around the metal tag. "Copy." When she stepped outside, the air smelled like rust and gun oil. The base was quieter than usual, fewer vehicles, fewer voices. Soldiers moved faster, heads down, tension thick enough to feel. The whispers were growing. She'd heard fragments as she passed. "She's not just an instructor. They say she killed a man during training. That tattoo, my uncle said it was from a ghost unit." Rumors feed on silence. She gave them nothing else to eat. Inside the training hall, the 12 medics stood waiting. Today, there were no simulations set up. No mannequins. Just 12 stretchers lined in perfect rows. Laura dropped her leather bag on the table. "Sit," she said. "They did." Her voice was steady. "You all handled yesterday's exercise well. You followed orders under chaos, improvised when the manuals ran dry. That's good." She paused. The room was silent except for the distant hum of ventilation. But a medic's real war isn't always fought outside. Gray frowned, meaning. She walked toward him. "Meaning your hands can heal while your mind starts to die." The words hit harder than they should have. Laura placed a small recording device on the table, pressed play. A man's voice filled the room. Rough, tired American reading casualty reports between static. "Shadow Talon, Narvak perimeter breach. Chemical dispersal contained. 4 survivors unaccounted for. Request evac confirmation. Repeat." Then silence. Laura let it hang there. Herrera leaned forward slowly. "That's classified comms." Laura nodded once. "It was once." "Why are we hearing this?" "Because what you saw yesterday wasn't the first time someone tried to kill me." Her tone wasn't dramatic. It was matter of fact. Gray shifted in his seat. "So you're saying you were part of that, whatever Shadow Talon was?" Laura's gaze met his. "I'm saying some people are buried alive in files that never existed. I'm one of them." The room stayed quiet. "You want to learn battlefield medicine," she continued. Then learn this: survival isn't just pulse and pressure, it's silence. It's knowing when to disappear and when to speak. Guerrero swallowed hard. Then why come back, why teach? Laura looked at her. Because if I don't pass it on, someone else will die for the same lesson. She turned off the recorder. Training resumes in 10. As she walked toward the supply room, the medic sat frozen, caught between disbelief and awe. Gray whispered to Herrera, "You buy that story?" Herrera didn't answer. He was thinking about the code, the precision of her movements, the shot she took without hesitation. He'd seen men like her before, but only in files stamped eyes only. The base command center pulsed with tension. Sergeant Major Ramos stood over a digital map, red markers spreading across the grid like infection. Karen Brooks stood beside him, tablet in hand. Motion sensors tripped at 300, 407, and again at 450, she said. All near the south fence line. No visuals, no breach detected. Ramos rubbed a hand across his jaw. Same time West was in her quarters. Karen nodded. Yes, sir, but that's not all. Someone accessed the restricted archive an hour later. Only one clearance matches. Whose? Karen hesitated. West. Ramos frowned. She pulled the Shadow Talon file. Yes, sir. He exhaled slowly. Then either she's protecting us from something or inviting it in. Karen looked up. You think she's compromised? I think she's hunted. By midday, the clouds had thinned. A faint sunlight filtered through as the medics regrouped outside for drills. Laura watched them from the sidelines, her face unreadable. Gray was leading the casualty carry. Herrera timed him. Guerrero checked vitals. They were sharper today, focused, driven, almost too quiet. When the exercise ended, Laura clapped once. Better. You're thinking like survivors now, not students. Gray exhaled. Feels like we're training for something bigger than med school. Laura's reply came soft. You are. She turned to leave when a voice called from behind. Ma'am. It was Guerrero. Laura stopped. About yesterday, Guerrero hesitated. That code on your back, VX097310, I saw it in a report. Intel rotation 2 years ago, classified as inactive, but the description matched Eagle insignia, black ink, unit marked erased. Laura said nothing. Guerrero's voice lowered. You were one of them, weren't you, Shadow Talon? Laura turned slowly. You read that file. I shouldn't have, but yes. Then you know how it ends. Guerrero nodded. It said they all died. Laura's eyes were calm, but her voice carried something deeper, grief sharpened into resolve. Files lie, blood doesn't. Before Guerrero could respond, a sharp tone blared from Laura's radio. 3 beeps. 1 pause, 2 more. Not a base signal. A field code, one used only by Shadow Talon. Laura's face drained of color. Everyone inside, she ordered. Now. Herrera frowned. Ma'am, what's? Move. They obeyed. As soon as the door sealed behind them, Laura activated the building's lockdown protocol. Metal shutters slid over the windows. The lights dimmed. Ma'am, Gray started. What's going on? Laura raised a finger. Quiet. The radio crackled again, then a distorted male voice broke through. VX09 leader. If you're hearing this, extraction window closes in 24 hours. They found us. Then static. Laura's pulse thudded once hard. Herrera stepped closer. Who was that? Laura's answer came low. Someone who shouldn't be alive. 2 hours later, she stood in front of Ramos's office, soaked again from the drizzle, the metal tag clutched in her fist. He looked up as she entered. You've been busy. She dropped the tag on his desk. Found this on my windshield last night. Ramos leaned forward, studying it. Recognized the symbol. Yes, Shadow Talon. Someone knows I'm here. Karen entered, tension written across her face. Sir, The message we traced earlier, it wasn't from outside. It was rooted internally through an unlisted frequency, and the encryption key used matches the one embedded in West's personnel file. Laura didn't flinch, which means someone cloned it. Ramos stood. "You're telling me we've got an intruder using your identity inside my base?" "Yes, and if they're following the same protocol we used 12 years ago, they won't stop until the mission done." "What mission?" Laura's eyes lifted. "The one we never finished." Silence. Karen broke it quietly. What was Shadow Talon's purpose? Laura exhaled. The words came slow, deliberate. "We were formed to intercept non-state chemical threats. We went in deep off record. Narvek wasn't supposed to exist on any map, but we stopped something there, a bomb, a shipment. Only 4 of us walked out. They erased the rest, made us ghosts. I disappeared. The others didn't make it, or so I thought." Ramos paced. "And now someone's back." Laura nodded. "Or someone pretending to be." Karen's voice was soft but trembling. "If it's true, what do we do?" Laura's answer was simple. "We wait." Ramos frowned. "For what?" She looked toward the window, where the storm was gathering again beyond the horizon. "For them to come to me." That night the base felt hollow. Even the wind seemed to move differently, weaving between buildings like it carried secrets. Laura stood by the barracks window, watching floodlights flicker across the compound. The tag was gone now, locked in the command vault, but the unease was. She caught her reflection again. Same face, same scars, but behind her eyes something old had started to stir, that survival instinct she'd buried beneath training schedules and quiet routines. The sound of boots echoed in the corridor, then a knock. "West." Ray Collins's voice. "Come in." He stepped inside, dripping rain, fatigue in every line of his body. "They've got guards doubled on every gate. Still, nobody saw who planted that tag." She nodded. "They won't. Whoever did it knows our blind spots better than we do." He hesitated. "You think it's one of your old team?" Laura looked out the window again. "If it is, they're sending a message." "What kind of message?" Her reflection met his through the glass. "That the war we buried isn't over." Ray swallowed. "You could leave, we'd understand." Her voice softened, but not her resolve. "Leaving doesn't end ghosts, Sergeant. It just gives them time to walk ahead of you." He nodded slowly. "Then we fight them." She smiled faintly. "We remember them first." Outside, thunder rolled again, deep, distant, promising. Laura stood still for a long moment, eyes locked on the horizon. She could almost hear it again. The memory of rotor blades, the chaos of Narvek, the screams, the silence that followed. Somewhere out there, someone who once shared that silence was awake again. And for the first time in years, Laura West felt the cold certainty that this time, she wasn't just being hunted. She was being called. How do you fight an enemy who knows your past better than you do? The night had stretched long, sleepless, and heavy. By morning, the sky hung low and pale, the kind of gray that made everything look like memory. Laura stood at the edge of the perimeter road, coffee cooling in her hands. The floodlights buzzed softly above, casting long, fractured shadows across the asphalt. She'd been there since dawn, watching the gates open, watching convoys roll out, watching faces that didn't look at her anymore. Rumors had done their work. A few days ago, she was the new instructor, quiet, competent, unthreatening. Now she was something else entirely, a mystery the soldiers whispered about between drills, the shadow they avoided meeting eyes with. She didn't blame them. The unknown always draws curiosity first, then distance. And distance was safer for them and for her. A low hum rolled across the yard, helicopter rotors slicing through the air. The base's morning drills were underway. "Ma'am," came a voice behind her. She turned. Guerrero stood at attention, rain jacket half-zipped, face pale from lack of sleep. "Report," Laura said. "No drills scheduled for our unit today, but Sergeant Herrera requested independent readiness training. Guerrero hesitated. "We were hopping for your oversight." Laura raised an eyebrow. "Hopping or ordered?" Guerrero smiled faintly. "Bit of both." Laura looked past her toward the training field, where the medic team was already assembling. Gray was packing near the gear crates, arms crossed, muttering something under his breath. Herrera adjusted the simulation dummies, methodical and focused. Laura sighed quietly. "Let's get to it." The rain began again before they even started. Fine at first, just mist clinging to hair and uniforms, then heavier, falling in rhythmic sheets. "Same setup as last time," Herrera called out. "Urban grid, casualty evac, standard 20-minute time frame." Laura stood off to the side, eyes scanning the skyline. Something felt wrong. Not in the setup, in the air itself. The kind of wrong that doesn't announce itself, but sits heavy in the gut. "Gray," she called, "check comms channel 3. He frowned, adjusted his headset. "Dead frequency." "Channel 6. Also dead." Laura's pulse slowed, then stopped. Herrera turned. "Ma'am." "Kill the drill now." Gray's jaw tightened. "We're mid-prep, why?" Her voice hardened. "Because when the air goes quiet, something's listening." And then it came, faint at first, then growing. Static across every comm line, every headset. The kind of static that carried a pattern, a code. 3 short bursts, one long, 2 short. The same pattern she'd heard the day before. "Inside," Laura shouted. But the explosion hit before they could move. The ground heaved. Fire bloomed from the far corner of the training grid, throwing mud and debris high into the air. The sound cracked through the compound like thunder splitting concrete. Herrera was the first to recover, grabbing Guerrero and dragging her behind cover. Gray hit the ground, instinctively checking his limbs. Laura was already moving, sprinting toward the smoke, toward the impact. Her boots slipped in the mud, hands burning against gravel, but she didn't stop. Through the haze she saw the scorch mark, black, circular, deliberate. Not a shell, not a mortar, a message. Embedded in the dirt was a small metal cylinder, half melted, engraved with a faint symbol, the War Eagle. Her stomach dropped. It wasn't just a reminder, it was a warning shot. Within 20 minutes the area was sealed off. Military police swarmed the field, radios crackling, drones scanning overhead. Ramos arrived in a Humvee, stepping out before it even stopped moving. "Report." Laura straightened, mud streaked across her uniform, voice steady. "Controlled explosion. No casualties. Improvised charge, low yield, directional only. Intent was message, not destruction." Ramos glanced at the cylinder. "You recognize it?" "Yes." "Same signature?" "Yes." Karen Brooks appeared beside them, pale, holding a data pad. "Sir, we traced a signal seconds before detonation, encrypted frequency, internal origin again. It was routed through the medical training network." Ramos's jaw tightened. "Meaning?" Laura answered for her. "Meaning someone inside this base just sent me a hello." The investigation dragged into the afternoon. Soldiers were interviewed, gear checked, comm systems scrubbed line by line. Nothing surfaced. Herrera and Guerrero stayed behind after questioning, sitting on the tailgate of a Humvee under the drizzle. Gray paced nearby, restless, running a hand through wet hair. "You all saw it. That explosion wasn't random. Someone's targeting her." Herrera looked up. "Then why warn first?" Gray shrugged. "Maybe whoever it is doesn't want her dead, not yet." Guerrero's voice was quiet. "Maybe they want her to remember." Laura approached then, carrying a sealed evidence bag, the metal cylinder inside. "You 3 with me." They followed her into the command tent. The air inside was warm, thick with the smell of coffee and electronics. Laura placed the bag on the table. You wanted to learn what the manuals don't teach. Here's lesson 2. Gray frowned, which is. Patterns never die, people do. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper, old, creased, nearly torn at the edges. This is from Narvek, the last op Shadow Talon ever ran. She unfolded it. Inside, a list of 4 names, handwritten in smudged ink. Herrera read them aloud softly. Laura West, call sign Wraith. Captain Elias Ford, call sign Ranger. Lieutenant Naomi Shaw, call sign Tempest. Corporal David Hale, call sign Falcon. Gray looked up. Those are the survivors. They were, Laura said, until they were. Guerrero frowned. What happened to them? Laura stared at the names. The report said a chemical detonation wiped the site. Truth is, we neutralized the weapon, but command ordered silence. No medals, no records, no witnesses. 2 of us died in the blast. The 3rd disappeared before extraction. That left me. Herrera leaned forward, and now one of them might be back. Laura nodded slowly, or someone who knows how to pretend to be. Night fell again before the base quieted. Laura sat alone in her quarters, lights off, only the glow of her tablet illuminating the desk. On the screen, a map of the Narvek region, the last coordinates she ever saw before that day 12 years ago. She zoomed in. The terrain was unrecognizable now, entire villages erased, borders redrawn. But there, near the bottom corner, a blinking dot appeared. A new signal, same encryption as the Shadow Talon distress beacon. Her chest tightened. She tapped to trace it. The coordinates aligned not overseas but inland, less than 30 miles from Fort Blackhawk. The realization hit like cold air. The war she thought she'd left behind had followed her home. The radio on her desk crackled suddenly, breaking the silence. No base channel, no ID. Just a voice, low, rough, distorted by static. Wraith. Laura froze. Only one person had ever called her that. She reached for the receiver. Identify. Static, then again. You shouldn't have stayed quiet this long. The line cut. The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. She sat still for a moment, then opened the drawer and pulled out her old sidearm. It wasn't standard issue anymore, black steel, worn grip, etched initials at the base. EF. Elias Ford. Her commander, her friend, her ghost. She stared at the weapon for a long time, then holstered it. Some wars never end because some promises never do. The next morning came with no warning and no calm. Karen met her at the briefing room door, breathless. You need to see this. Ramos was already inside, face pale under the fluorescent light. On the main screen, surveillance footage played from the night before, timestamp 02:13. A lone figure crossing the west perimeter fence. No uniform, no visible weapon, moving with precision like someone who knew every blind spot. The resolution sharpened just enough to reveal the shadow of an emblem on the intruder's sleeve, a black eagle. Laura's heart stopped. Karen whispered, "It's the same insignia." Ramos turned to her. "You said all Shadow Talon survivors were accounted for." "They were," Laura said softly. "Then who the hell is that?" Her eyes stayed fixed on the screen. "If it's who I think it is, then the dead are walking back into the light." By nightfall, Fort Blackhawk was under full alert. Searchlights swept the fence lines, patrols doubled, every gate reinforced. But Laura knew it wouldn't matter. Whoever had crossed into the base didn't need open gates. They'd been trained for this by her, by Elias, by the same mission that had buried them all. In her quarters, she stripped off her jacket, revealing the eagle tattoo beneath. The ink looked darker under the lamplight, almost alive. She stared at it in the mirror. VX097310. A code that once stood for life, now marking her for death. Her reflection didn't flinch. "You wanted me to remember," she whispered. "Now come find me." Outside, thunder rumbled over the mountains again. And in the distance, faint, nearly lost to the wind, a single helicopter passed through the clouds without lights, moving toward the base. The storm had returned, but this time it carried familiar ghosts. Why was the helicopter flying dark? No transponder, no running lights, no clearance code. It appeared out of the storm like a phantom blade slicing through fog, sound swallowed by thunder. Laura stepped out into the courtyard as it passed overhead, her raincoat whipping around her. The other soldiers didn't even look up. They couldn't hear it through the downpour. But she could. She could feel it deep in her chest, that old vibration she hadn't felt in 12 years. She whispered to herself, "That's not random." Then the lights flickered across the base, once, twice, then everything went black. The power grid failed in silence. The only sound was the rain. And for the first time since Narvik, Laura felt the strange calm that always came right before the fight. Emergency lights flickered to life seconds later, bathing Fort Blackhawk in a dull red glow. Karen Brooks sprinted down the corridor toward command. Ramos barked orders into a radio that wasn't transmitting. Every frequency was jammed. "Backup generators coming online," he shouted. "Negative, sir," came a voice from the tech pit. "Systems are scrambled. It's not a malfunction, it's deliberate." Ramos slammed a fist on the console. "Sabotage. Or infiltration." Karen froze mid-step, her eyes darting toward the window. "Sir, where's Laura?" Ramos turned. "Find her now." Laura was already moving. Her flashlight cut a thin line through the dark hallway, reflecting off the steel walls. The silence was absolute, broken only by the faint dripping of water from ceiling vents. She reached the armory. The biometric scanner blinked once, then went dark. Manual override. She punched in an old code, one that shouldn't have worked but did. The door slid open. She grabbed her old gear bag from the bottom rack, the same one she hadn't touched since Afghanistan. A pistol, 2 spare mags, flashlight, knife, field radio, analog, not digital, untouchable by modern jammers. The bag felt heavier than it used to. Maybe she'd just gotten tired of carrying invisible things. When she turned to leave, she caught her reflection in the glass of a display case. Hair soaked, eyes steady, the tattoo dark against her skin. She almost didn't recognize herself. Then a voice behind her said quietly, still keeping it in the same place. She froze. It wasn't a hallucination. The voice was real, low, gravelly, unmistakable. She turned slowly. Standing in the doorway was a man she'd buried in memory 12 years ago. Elias Ford. Same frame, same calm posture, but his face older, scarred, colder. The stormlight flashed behind him, framing his silhouette like a ghost that refused to stay dead. Laura's throat tightened. "You're not real." He smiled faintly. "I told you I'd walk you home if I ever made it out." Her pulse thudded once. "You died, Elias." "Not quite." He stepped closer. "The explosion didn't kill me. The people who ordered it did." Laura's grip tightened on the flashlight. "How are you standing here?" "They needed someone to blame for Narvik. I was easier to bury than to explain." Her breath came shallow. "You were." He cut her off. "I was captured, spent 2 years in places that don't exist on maps, then traded, erased, rebuilt under a new name, but I never forgot what they did to us." Laura studied him, every instinct torn between belief and defense. "And the others?" "Naomi's gone, Hale too. I found their markers myself." He took another step closer. "You were the only one they couldn't find, until now." Lightning flashed again, illuminating the streaks of rain on his jacket and the mark on his shoulder. The same eagle, but altered, one wing torn, the code beneath changed. VX09E732. The same one from the tag left on her windshield. Laura's heart sank. That was you. He nodded. I had to be sure you were still here. Outside, the alarms began to wail. The base lights flickered again, flicked off, then back on. Karen's voice came over the PA, distorted. Security breach, East Wing, possible intruder. Laura's voice was cold. You brought them here. Elias' tone stayed calm. They were already watching. I just lit the signal. What signal? The one that says the last loose end has been found. She stared at him. You used me. He didn't deny it. You were always the only one they'd chase. I needed to draw them out. To do what? To end what they started. By putting everyone on this base in danger. His expression hardened. You think you can bury a monster by pretending it doesn't exist. You train soldiers here, Laura. You teach them to survive what we couldn't. That's noble. But it won't change the fact that the people who sent us to die are still writing the same orders for someone else. Her voice dropped. Then you're going to kill them. I'm going to expose them. The sound of boots echoed from the hallway, MPs shouting, rifles ready. Laura motioned toward a side door. Move now. They slipped into the corridor, just as a searchlight swept through the armory. Elias followed her down the stairwell, boots silent, steps synchronized like muscle memory remembered itself. She whispered, You jammed our grid. Had to make sure we could talk before they came. Who's they? The same people who tried to erase us, and the ones who replaced them. They reached the sub-basement, a forgotten maintenance level below the training wing. It smelled of dust, metal, and old oil. Laura swung open a side locker, pulling out a manual override kit. You shouldn't have come here. Elias' voice softened. You always said survival meant adapting. That was before survival meant treason. He chuckled quiet, almost sad, still following the rule book. I follow my rules. And what are those now? Keep people alive, no exceptions. He stared at her, even if it means letting the truth die. She met his eyes, especially then. Upstairs, chaos spread through the base. Ramos stood at the command console, voice hoarse. We've lost power to half the sectors, cameras offline, radio interferences bouncing from inside our own grid. Karen's fingers flew across the keyboard. Sir, it's not just jamming, someone's rerouting our system into a loop. Ramos barked, meaning what? It's echoing its own signals. We can't trace the source. Can we shut it down? She hesitated. If we do, we risk losing control of the outer gates. He swore under his breath. Then find West. She's the only one who's seen this before. Karen stopped typing. Sir, what if she's with whoever did this? Ramos looked at her, eyes hard. Then God help both of them. Back in the sublevel, Laura and Elias moved toward the old communications chamber, a forgotten relay room filled with outdated servers, most decommissioned years ago. Elias brushed dust from a console. Still remember how to work one of these. Laura's tone was sharp. You think I stopped? He grinned faintly. Good. He connected a portable drive to the terminal. The screen flickered to life, code scrolling like rain. Laura watched the data stream. What is that? Everything they erased. From where? From us. He turned to her. Every mission file, every name, every photograph they purged. I spent 12 years piecing it together. The proof that Shadow Talon wasn't a myth, it was a cover. For what? For testing chemical dispersal protocols on civilians. Her breath hitched. That's not possible. Isn't it? He held her gaze. We were told to contain a weapon, but what if we were the experiment? The words hit like impact. She shook her head slowly. No, I saw the bodies, I saved them. You saved who they wanted you to save, enough to make the report look clean. Laura's voice trembled now, fury fighting grief. You're saying they used us. I'm saying they used everyone. Before she could respond, the door behind them burst open. Flashlights, rifles, shouting. Hands where we can see them. Ramos's voice echoed in the chamber, commanding, furious. Step away from that terminal, West. Laura turned, hands raised slightly. He's telling the truth. Ramos's eyes burned. The truth doesn't matter if it gets my people killed. Elias didn't move. His hand hovered near the console. You shut this down, and you'll never know what your own government did here. Put the drive down, Ramos ordered. Laura looked between them, her old commander and her current one, realizing the lines between right and wrong had blurred beyond repair. Elias whispered, You told me once survival isn't about rules. It's about what you can live with after. She whispered back, And what if I can't live with either? Then the lights flickered again. A metallic click echoed from the corner. Karen's voice broke through the noise. Sir, movement on upper grid, multiple signatures inbound. They're inside the base. Ramos froze. Who? The lights died completely. In the blackness, only the sound of rotor blades remained, faint, distant, growing louder. Laura turned toward Elias, voice barely audible. You brought the storm. He met her eyes. No, I just stopped running from it. And outside, through the rain and thunder, the second helicopter descended, this one armed, unmarked, and silent. In the distance, Fort Blackhawk's alarm screamed again. But this time, they weren't drills. They were warnings. The ghosts of Narvik had come home. The sky had turned the color of steel. Thunder crawled across the horizon, slow and deliberate, like it was watching. Fort Blackhawk's sirens screamed through the storm, not the sharp drills of training but the guttural, rising tone of real alarm, the kind that makes even veterans' hands tremble because everyone knows what it means. This time, it isn't practice. Laura pressed herself against the concrete wall of the sublevel stairwell, pulse racing. The lights had gone out completely now. Only the intermittent flashes of lightning illuminated the hall, blue-white bursts of clarity between long stretches of darkness. She heard them before she saw them, boots above, fast, organized. Not the heavy stomp of MPs. These were silent, coordinated. Elias, she whispered. He was crouched beside the old relay console, packing up the hard drive. They're early. Who? The cleanup team. He slung the pack across his shoulder. The same kind of people who erased us 12 years ago. Her voice was tight. You said you wanted to expose them. How do you do that if they kill everyone here? Elias gave her a faint, almost weary smile. You always did think too small. Too small, she hissed. I'm not here to survive this. I'm here to make sure it never happens again. Lightning flared again, catching his face, the calm resignation of a man who'd already chosen his ending. Laura grabbed his arm. Don't you dare talk like that. He looked down at her hand. You buried me once, Wraith. Don't try to save me again. Before she could answer, a distant explosion rattled the floor. The whole base seemed to shudder. He checked his watch. They've breached the east perimeter. We've got minutes. Laura reached for her radio. Ramos, come in. Nothing, static. She tried again. Command, this is West. You have hostiles inbound. A burst of white noise cut her off. Then faintly through the static, too many secure hangar. The line went dead. She looked at Elias. They're hitting command. He nodded. They'll go for communications next. We need to get this drive out before they wipe it. And where exactly do you think we're going? He didn't answer. He was already moving, slipping through the dark corridor toward the service tunnel. Laura followed, not because she trusted him, but because every other option had burned away. Up above, Fort Blackhawk had turned into a war zone. Flashes of muzzle fire tore through the rain as unmarked figures in black moved across the compound, efficient, lethal, faceless. They didn't shout commands. They didn't hesitate. They executed with surgical precision. Ramos and Corinne had taken cover behind a transport truck near the comm tower. Corinne shouted over the gunfire, "Who the hell are these people?" Ramos reloaded, eyes scanning for movement. Not mercs, too disciplined. She ducked as a bullet sparked off the metal beside her head. Then who? He fired back twice, clipped one of the advancing silhouettes. The man dropped silently. People who think secrets are worth killing for. Corinne looked toward the base entrance. "Sir, if West's right, they're after the same files." "Then she's our only shot at keeping them out of enemy hands." "But she's with him," Corinne said. "The one who started this." Ramos turned sharply. "If she's alive, she's not the problem, she's the proof." Another explosion rocked the east side. He pulled Corinne by the arm. "Come on, we find West before they do." In the tunnels, Laura and Elias moved fast, half running, half sliding through slick concrete passages lit only by their flashlights. "Where does this lead?" she asked, breath ragged. "Maintenance exit behind the old range, outside the main perimeter." "Good, once we're out we can." Elias stopped suddenly. "What?" He crouched, brushing his fingers along the floor. There a red beam, faint and low, trip sensor. He looked up. "They know the tunnels." She swore under her breath. "How?" "They train the people who built them." He pulled a knife from his belt, slid it carefully beneath the beam, wedging a small metal chip between the sensor heads. The red light blinked once, then froze. Laura exhaled. "You always did like impossible odds." He smiled faintly. "It's where we met, remember?" Her silence was answer enough. They kept moving. The tunnel angled upward, the sound of rain getting louder. The faint light of the surface appeared ahead, a maintenance hatch barely wide enough for one person at a time. Elias pushed it open. The smell of wet soil and smoke hit them like a wave. The training field was unrecognizable, littered with debris, scorch marks, and the flicker of emergency flares. The storm had swallowed the sky completely. He scanned the area. Extraction points 300 meters west. "Extraction," she said sharply. "You planned for this." He didn't answer. He just started walking. Back at command, Ramos and Corinne reached the lower-level corridor, the same one Laura had used earlier. They found the door to the relay chamber open. Ramos entered first, rifle raised. The room was empty, dust in the air. Console still running, its screen scrolling endless lines of data. Corinne stepped closer. "Sir, it's still transferring." "To where?" He frowned. "That's what I'm afraid of." The screen flickered, then displayed a single message in looping text. "The truth doesn't die." Ramos's stomach turned cold. "He's broadcasting it." Corinne's voice trembled. "Broadcasting what?" Ramos pointed to the blinking drive port. "Everything." Laura and Elias reached the edge of the training grounds. The rain had turned to a downpour, sheets of it slicing sideways. In the distance, 2 helicopters hovered low, their spotlights sweeping across the compound. Elias pointed to the far side of the field. "There." Through the rain, Laura saw a small transport truck, engine running, lights off. One soldier behind the wheel. "Contact?" she asked. "Ally," he said. "Old connection." She hesitated. "You brought people here." He nodded. "I needed backup in case I didn't make it this far." "And you didn't think to warn me?" "Would you have come if I did?" Lightning cracked overhead, throwing both their faces into stark light. Old comrades, once bound by purpose, now divided by survival. Laura stepped closer. "Tell me one thing, Elias. Was any of this about the truth or just revenge?" He met her gaze. "Does it matter if it's the same target?" Before she could answer, Movement flashed behind him. 3 silhouettes emerged from the fog, rifles up. Laura tackled him sideways, just as bullets tore through the space where he'd been standing. They hit the ground hard, mud splattering across their faces. She rolled to one knee, fired 2 rounds, clipped one, dropped another. The third disappeared behind a barrier. Elias wiped blood from his cheek. Still fast. You're still reckless. More figures appeared from the far side of the field. They were boxed in. Elias tossed her the data drive. If I don't make it. Don't you finish that sentence. You know what to do. Laura gritted her teeth. We both walk out. He gave her a look that said he didn't believe it. Then he stood. Elias, she hissed. He fired a short burst toward the attackers, buying seconds. You were always the better survivor, Wraith. Don't waste it now. Elias. But he was already moving, sprinting toward the approaching figures, drawing their fire, giving her a chance she didn't want. She cursed under her breath, clutched the drive, and dove toward the truck. Bullets sparked against the chassis as she slid inside. The driver turned, startled Guerrero. Ma'am. Drive. The truck roared to life, tires spinning through the mud as it tore across the field. Through the rain, Laura looked back. Elias was still standing, still firing, his silhouette vanishing into smoke and gunfire. Then a flash. A roar. The ground lifted. The shockwave hit the truck like a punch. Guerrero slammed the brakes. Both women were thrown forward. When the smoke cleared, there was nothing left of the spot where Elias had been. Just fire and silence. Hours later, the storm finally broke. The surviving units regrouped near the base hospital. The lights were back on, but the air still smelled of smoke and cordite. Ramos stood at the triage 10 entrance, uniform torn, face streaked with dirt. Laura approached, mud-soaked, carrying the drive in her gloved hand. He looked at her, equal parts relief and suspicion. You made it. Most of us did, she said quietly. He nodded toward the drive. That what they came for? Yes. Does it tell us who they were? She shook her head. It tells us who we were. Karen stepped forward, exhaustion in her voice. He didn't make it, did he? Laura's silence was answer enough. Ramos took the drive, weighing it in his hand. You think it's worth the lives it cost? Laura looked toward the smoke still rising from the field. That depends on what we do with it. Later that night, when the base finally quieted, Laura sat alone on the bleachers outside the training hall. The rain had thinned to mist again. The world smelled of iron and ash. She opened her palm. In it lay a small, twisted piece of metal, the last fragment of the tag Elias had given her. She turned it over, reading the faded code. VX09E732. The rest had melted away. She whispered, You finally got your ending. In the silence that followed, she could almost hear his voice again, calm, certain. The truth doesn't die, Wraith. It just waits for someone brave enough to speak it. Her eyes lifted toward the horizon, where the first hints of dawn were pushing through the clouds. The world looked wounded but awake. And maybe that was enough. Some stories don't end with victory. They end with survival and the courage to keep remembering. She rose, shoulders squared, eyes steady. Somewhere behind her, Fort Blackhawk's loudspeakers crackled back to life. Orders, repairs, the endless rhythm of duty resuming. But she knew things would never be the same. The storm had passed, the ghosts had come and gone. And somewhere deep inside her, past the scars, past the silence, a small, unbroken part of her finally let go. Because sometimes dignity doesn't shout. It simply endures. Morning came quietly, as if the storm had exhausted the world. No sirens, no helicopters, no shouted orders. Only the faint hiss of wind moving through broken fencing and the soft metallic rattle of flag chains against the pole. Fort Blackhawk looked smaller in daylight. Scorched asphalt, shattered windows, tire ruts filled with brown water. Smoke hung low, refusing to leave. Laura walked the perimeter alone. Her boots sank into mud that still smelled of cordite. She kept one hand inside her jacket pocket, fingers closing around the drive she'd taken back from Ramos. He'd called it evidence. She called it a wound that wouldn't clot. The base doctor had cleared her hours ago. No concussion, no shrapnel, only fatigue. She hadn't said that fatigue felt like grief in disguise. A group of young medics worked nearby, patching sandbags, sweeping debris. They nodded when she passed. None spoke. Respect and fear sometimes looked identical. She stopped near the training yard. The crater where Elias had vanished was cordoned off with yellow tape. Engineers had already marked it for repair. She wanted to tell them to leave it, to let the ground remember. A voice carried through the rain-wet air. They'll fill it by noon. Laura turned. Master Sergeant Ray Collins stood behind her, cap low against the wind, eyes tired but alert. "Orders?" she asked. "Protocol." He stepped beside her, watching the workers. "Base has to look operational by inspection. Command doesn't like scars showing." She gave a small, humorless smile. "They never do." He studied her for a moment. "You lost someone out there." "I lose someone every time a lie wins." Ray folded his arms. "That drive you're guarding, Ramos says it's classified beyond his clearance. He's waiting for Washington to claim it." "They will," she said, "and when they do, it disappears again." "You going to let that happen?" Laura looked at the crater. "I don't know yet." Ray hesitated. "You think Ford was telling the truth?" She met his eyes. "He believed it, that's enough for me." He nodded slowly. "Belief gets people killed. So does silence." Ray sighed. "Careful, West. There's a thin line between telling the truth and becoming it." When he left, she stayed where she was, watching the workers shovel the last of the burned soil into a truck. Each scoop felt like a memory erased. By afternoon, the base ran again, half its power restored, half its spirit gone. Corinne Brooks sat in the command office, sleeves rolled up, a dozen open files spread across the desk. She'd been interrogating data from the damaged servers since dawn, tracing where the broadcast had gone. Laura entered quietly. Corinne didn't look up. "You should be resting." "I don't rest well." "Neither do I." Laura placed the coffee she'd brought beside her. "Any luck?" Corinne gestured to the screen. "Bits and pieces." Ford uploaded fragments before the system collapsed, enough to confirm Shadow Talon existed, enough to prove someone buried it. "Names?" "Mostly redacted, but there's a pattern: contractors, shell companies, medical research fronts. Same funding trail leading to a division called Echelon Labs." Laura frowned. "Never heard of it." "You weren't meant to. They handled biodefense testing in Narvac. If Ford's files are real, they weaponized the same chemicals we were sent to neutralize." Laura leaned closer and used Shadow Talon as field verification. Corinne's voice lowered. "He wasn't lying, Laura. We weren't soldiers stopping a threat. We were the experiment." Silence settled between them, heavy as lead. After a moment, Laura said softly, "Then the question isn't who killed him. It's who still profits from pretending he's dead." Corinne looked up, meeting her eyes. "Ramos wants to send the drive to HQ tonight. Once it's gone, it's gone." Laura straightened. "Then we have until sunset." The mess hall that evening was quieter than church. Conversations ended when she entered. Some soldiers stared, some looked away. Guilt had a sound. It was the hush that followed her boots across the floor. She sat at a corner table, untouched plate before her, eyes on the rain streaking the windows. Herrera approached hat in hand. "Ma'am." She nodded for him to sit. He did, awkwardly, the way soldiers do when they don't know if they're about to be thanked or reprimanded. "Guerrero said you saved her life," he began. Laura shook her head. She saved her own, I just reminded her how. He hesitated. The others want to know if training resumes tomorrow. Does it ever stop? She asked. He smiled faintly, then turned serious. People are scared. Half the base thinks the attack was foreign. The other half thinks it was us. What do you think? Herrera looked down. I think you know more than you're allowed to say. She studied him. If I told you the truth, would you believe it? He met her gaze. After what I saw this week, I'd believe almost anything. Laura nodded. Then believe this. Nothing that happened here was supposed to see daylight. The only reason any of us are alive is because someone wanted witnesses. Who? She exhaled. Maybe the same person who wanted them dead. He looked puzzled. She didn't elaborate. Some truths needed time to breathe before they were spoken aloud. That night, the base lights dimmed early to conserve power. Ramos's office glowed with a single desk lamp. He stood over the hard drive like it was a bomb. When Laura entered, he didn't look up. You here to convince me not to send it? I'm here to ask what happens when you do. He rubbed his temples. Chain of command handles it. Investigation opens. Maybe justice, maybe a cover-up. That's above my pay grade. Justice isn't above mine. He finally looked at her. You think you can fight the system alone? No, but I can make sure it remembers my name. He sighed. You sound like Ford. He died for the truth. Or because of it. They stared at each other across the desk. Two soldiers from different wars trapped in the same one. Ramos opened a drawer, pulled out an envelope, slid it toward her. Discharge papers, effective tomorrow. You're done here. She didn't touch them. Is that an order? She asked. It's a favor. Then do me one in return. He waited. If something happens to me tonight, make sure this drive reaches someone who still believes in the oath we swore, not the politics that poisoned it. Ramos's jaw tightened. You planning something? She turned toward the door. I'm planning to finish a mission. Midnight. The base slept in uneasy silence. Laura moved like a shadow through the corridors, the drive hidden beneath her vest. Every door she passed whispered memories, the medic wing, the briefing room, the hall where she'd first been doubted. At the communications tower, she climbed the narrow maintenance ladder to the roof. The storm had cleared, leaving the air sharp and electric. City lights flickered faintly on the horizon. She connected the drive to the old analog transmitter, one of the few systems untouched by digital lockdown. The screen asked for an access code. Her fingers hesitated, then typed the one she swore she'd never use again. VX097310. The terminal beeped once, connection live. Data began to flow, compressed, encrypted, unstoppable. Somewhere out there, every packet carried fragments of the truth Elias had died for. She watched the progress bar crawl forward, 10%, 20, 40. Behind her, a voice said, You really think they won't trace that? She didn't turn. I'm counting on it. Karen stepped into the moonlight, jacket pulled tight. Ramos said you'd try this. Then why are you here instead of stopping me? Because someone should witness it. Laura smiled faintly. You sure you're ready to become part of the file? Karen's voice softened. Maybe it's time the world knew what its heroes actually cost. They stood together, the wind tugging at their hair, the antenna humming. At 87%, floodlights snapped on across the yard below. Shouts echoed, security units converging. Karen glanced down. They're coming. Laura kept her eyes on the screen, almost done. Rifles clicked below, boots pounding stairs. Karen drew her sidearm. I'll hold them. No, Laura's tone was firm. No more dead for this. She pulled a small chip from her pocket, a backup drive barely the size of a coin, and pressed it into Karen's hand. If they stop me, this still gets out. Find someone who will listen. Corinne's eyes widened. Laura. Go. Corinne hesitated, then ran. The first soldier reached the roof, just as the upload hit 100%. Laura turned, raising her hands. Ramos pushed through the line of troops, breathless. What did you do? Finished the report you started. You realize you've just leaked classified intel to every major network on the continent. Yes. He stepped closer. They'll court-martial you, maybe worse. I know. Why? Laura looked past him, toward the horizon brightening with pre-dawn light. Because truth without witnesses is just a rumor. Ramos stared at her, the anger in his face fatting into something heavier, respect, maybe pity. You could have run. I've been running for 12 years. He lowered his weapon. Then what now? She exhaled slowly. Now they decide whether I was right. 2 hours later, before the official arrest order even processed, the first news alerts hit the networks. Leaked footage. Declassified reports. Audio from Narvik. Headlines spread faster than containment orders could be written. Covert U.S. unit used in unauthorized chemical tests. By dawn, half the world was asking the same question. Who was VX097310? Inside the base cell, Laura sat on a narrow cot, wrists cuffed loosely. Outside, Corinne argued with military police for visitation rights. When the door opened, Ramos entered alone. He placed a small radio on the table. The faint voice of a news anchor bled through the static. They're calling you a whistleblower, he said quietly. Others are calling you a traitor. Laura smiled faintly. They're both half right. He studied her for a long moment. Was it worth it? She looked at the window, where the first sunlight poured across the wall. Ask me again when the truth starts saving lives instead of ending them. Ramos nodded once. You might never see outside again. She leaned back against the wall. Freedom's overrated, clarity is. He started to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I think Ford would have been proud. She closed her eyes. He already knew. Outside the detention wing, cameras rolled, journalists shouted questions, officials rehearsed denials. Inside, Laura sat in silence, heartbeat steady, gaze calm. Through the narrow window, she could see Fort Blackhawk's flag stirring in the morning wind, tattered but still standing. Maybe that was all any of them could hope for. The truth was free now, flying higher than any insignia. And somewhere in whatever quiet place soldiers go when the mission, finally done, Elias Ford was watching. She whispered, barely audible, "Rest now, Ranger. The story's yours again." The light through the window warmed her face. And for the first time since Narvik, Laura West smiled. Because sometimes victory doesn't roar. Sometimes it simply tells the truth and survives to see the sun rise. The world didn't explode when the files went public. It just shifted, the way a landscape changes after an earthquake, quietly, permanently, never the same again. In the first 24 hours, news anchors struggled to pronounce VX097310. Government spokesmen called it misinformation. Analysts filled airwaves with maps, timelines, speculation. Some said the leaks were fake. Others swore they were the final proof that ghosts wore uniforms. And somewhere between those two storms of opinion sat Laura West, anonymous prisoner 2147, confined to a small room on the edge of Fort Blackhawk. No trial date, no visitor, just silence and a single window facing east. Every morning she watched the sun rise over the training fields. The crater was gone now, filled and paved, but when the light hit just right she could still see its outline, a faint circle darker than the rest of the asphalt, like the ground itself refused to forget. They brought her food twice a day, sometimes Corinne, sometimes no one. She didn't ask for updates, they arrived anyway. Whispers carried through the corridor, guards trading headlines when they thought she wasn't listening. Congress hearings, Resignations. Investigation into covert programs suspended since 2011. Each rumor was another breath for Elias' ghost. One evening, the door clicked open and Corinne stepped in, carrying a small folder. No uniform today, civilian clothes, exhausted eyes. "You look like you've been fighting the weather," Laura said softly. Corinne sat across from her. "I've been fighting the aftermath." "They blaming you yet?" "Not officially, but unofficially I'm radioactive." Laura smiled faintly. "Welcome to the club." Corinne placed the folder on the table. "They finished analyzing the data Ford left. You were right, it's everything. Field tests, funding chains, burial orders. They can't deny it now." Laura didn't touch the folder. "And what happens next?" "Public inquiry. Maybe a tribunal. They'll need a face to represent the leak." Laura raised an eyebrow. "A villain or a witness?" "Depends on which network you watch." For a while neither spoke. The air between them buzzed with unspoken things. Finally Corinne said, "They're offering you a deal. Sign a non-disclosure agreement. Quiet retirement, sealed record, you disappear again." Laura looked at her. "And if I do?" "Then they make an example out of you." Laura leaned back against the cold wall. "If they still need examples, they haven't learned a thing." Corinne exhaled, defeated. "You could have had a normal life, you know." "I tried that. The past kept breaking through the floorboards." Corinne closed the folder. "You know people out there, they're protesting for you. They paint the eagle on walls. They call it the mark of witness. Half of them don't even know what it means, but it's spreading." Laura smiled again, softer this time. "Maybe that's enough. The truth's louder when it doesn't need a name." Weeks passed. The hearings began in Washington. Broadcasts played on the small TV in the guard station outside her cell. Senators questioned generals under oath. Screens blurred names and faces. The phrase "shadow Talon" was repeated so many times it lost its mystery, turned into policy language and talking points. One morning, a young reporter managed to shout through the gates before security pulled her away. "Laura West, hero or traitor?" Laura heard it from her window. She whispered to the glass, "Neither." Heroism demanded applause. Betrayal demanded forgiveness. She wanted neither. She only wanted silence that finally told the truth. Ramos visited next. He looked older, shoulders heavier, uniform stripped of its decorations. "Didn't think I'd see you again," she said. He dropped into the chair opposite her. "I'm not supposed to be here. They reassigned me to domestic security review." "That's the military version of exile." He smiled faintly. "You made sure there's plenty of company there." They shared a moment of weary humor. Then he reached into his coat and placed a small envelope on the table. "What's that?" "Clearance notice. You're being transferred, not to another cell, to civilian custody. Hearing scheduled in 48 hours. Public." He nodded. "They want transparency, or at least the illusion of it." She studied his face. "You still think I was wrong?" He hesitated. "I think you forced us to look in a mirror we weren't ready for, and I'm not sure that's wrong." She extended a hand. "Then maybe you finally understand Ford." Ramos shook it firm. "For what it's worth, thank you." When he left, she stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. Inside, a single sentence typed in black ink. "Custody transfer approved, pending transport." No signature, no explanation, just approval. She folded it neatly and slipped it into her pocket. Freedom conditional, fragile, felt heavier than chains. 2 nights later, the van doors opened to the smell of sea air. They'd brought her to a coastal detention facility for the hearing. Reporters clustered beyond the fences, cameras flashing like lightning. Inside the hearing room, the walls were white, sterile, humming with microphones. A half-circle of officials waited behind nameplates. When they called her name, she stood without hesitation. "Captain Laura West, Do you acknowledge your role in the unauthorized dissemination of classified materials? I acknowledge my role in preventing another Narvek. Do you regret your actions? No. You understand the legal consequences. I understand silence already buried 12 years of them. They whispered among themselves. One man adjusted his glasses. Do you wish to make a statement for the record? She looked straight at him. The record has enough of my voice. I'd rather speak to whoever's still listening outside these walls. He frowned. Proceed. Laura took a breath. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. War teaches you how to stop bleeding, but not how to live with what you've seen. Truth works the same way. It saves lives, but it doesn't heal the people who carry it. I didn't leak secrets to destroy trust. I did it because trust had already been destroyed quietly under paperwork and false names. If that's treason, then maybe we need better definitions. The room stayed silent. The recorder light blinked once, red and patient. When she sat down again, someone behind her whispered, "God help us, she's right." 3 months later the verdict came. No prison, no pardon, a gray middle ground the law created when it couldn't decide what to do with conscience. She was stripped of clearance, released under surveillance, forbidden to leave the country. Freedom with a leash. But it was still air, still sunlight, and that was enough. Laura moved to a small coastal town north of the base, a rented cottage on a bluff overlooking the sea. She lived quietly, taught emergency response at the local fire department, grew herbs in a window box. Sometimes locals recognized her from old footage, most didn't. The ocean kept its own secrets. Letters began arriving, handwritten, careful, veterans, medics, students, strangers who said her story made them question or hope or finally speak. She kept them all in a wooden box beside the bed. The lid bore a single carved word, Wraith. Every few weeks she'd hike down to the rocks at sunset, carrying one letter at a time, reading it aloud to the wind before letting it go. Paper dissolves fast in salt water, words faster still. But the feeling lingered, the sense that somewhere out there, truth was learning how to breathe again. One morning, nearly a year after the siege, she woke to the sound of a helicopter passing far offshore. Not military, Coast Guard orange, ordinary, harmless. Still, the vibration stirred something deep. She walked outside, mug in hand, letting the breeze tangle her hair. The horizon burned gold. Her reflection caught in the window, older, lines at the eyes, the faint shadow of the eagle tattoo visible beneath her collar. She traced it absently, not as a wound now, but as a reminder. The code beneath, VX097310, had faded a little with time. Ink, like memory, softens when it's done its job. She whispered, "Rest easy, Ranger." A gull cried overhead, circling once before vanishing into the glare. By noon, the mail truck came up the narrow road. The driver handed her a single envelope with no return address. Inside, one photo, 4 soldiers standing in desert light, smiles half real, uniforms dust-stained. In the corner, Elias Ford's handwriting, "For when you forget why you began." Behind the photo, a small data chip taped to the back. She turned it over, heart quickening. On it, 3 engraved letters, EF. She slid it into her laptop. A single file opened. Video grainy, timestamp 12 years earlier. Elias' face appeared, younger, unscarred. "Wraith," he said, looking straight into the camera. "If you're seeing this, you made it out. That means there's still hope. Don't let them bury what we learned. Don't let our silence outlive our voices." The footage cut to black. Laura closed the lid slowly, tears she hadn't expected pressing behind her eyes. The world outside her window shimmered with heat, waves catching sunlight like fragments of metal. For the first time in years, she let herself cry, quietly, freely, not from pain but from release. Because ghosts don't always haunt to be remembered. Sometimes they stay to make sure we keep going. Evening fell. She walked down to the shore, sat on the same rock where she'd released the letters, and watched the tide come in. In the fading light, she thought of the people who'd carried her through. Guerrero's grit, Herrera's steadiness, Karen's courage, Ramos's reluctant faith, Elias' final fire. A constellation of imperfect souls who'd chosen truth over comfort. She picked up a smooth stone, turned it in her hand, and whispered, "For all of you." Then she threw it into the sea. Ripples spread, vanished. The horizon glowed crimson, then darkened to violet. She stayed until the first stars appeared. Then she rose, brushing sand from her hands, and walked home. Behind her, the waves erased her footprints one by one. In the years that followed, reports would list reforms, commissions, memorials. The name Laura West would fade from headlines, reduced to a footnote in textbooks. Some would call her reckless, others brave. But in the quiet corners of bases and classrooms, medics would still quote one line passed down like a prayer. "Don't worship the tools, worship the principles." And somewhere above the ocean, in the clean light of dawn, the war eagle would keep flying, ink fatting, meaning growing, proof that even the smallest act of defiance can outlive the people who dared it. Because truth, once spoken, never really dies. It just waits for the next voice brave enough to carry it. And dignity never speaks. It simply acts.